Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you. And it's such wonderful topics that we have been talking today since 8:30 in the morning. I see like some faces already like being here since early in the morning, but I think like the next session is also very important. And I see like more people coming, and I know that some people also don't speak in Bahasa Indonesia. So I think we will keep the sessions all in English. And for you, I want to introduce a little bit about Muhammadiyah for you that maybe not familiar with Muhammadiyah. So Muhammadiyah is an Indonesian Muslim organization that was established in 1912. It is currently 108 years old, and it has about 28 million members. Muhammadiyah always has a strong commitment to encourage Muslim women engagement in public space. Muhammadiyah Women Organization, ISIA, was founded 103 years ago with the focus to improve people access to education, healthcare, and social services. Since Muhammadiyah, and we talk a lot about it today, would like to intensify Muhammadiyah global presence and engagement, I think it's imperative for us to learn stories how Muslim women in other countries like United States do civic engagement in public spaces, how they do public advocacy for Muslim Ummah, and how they navigate challenges that come with it. Therefore, we are very happy to have a prominent activist, Sister Sabina Mohyuddin, here to share her experience and expertise with us today. Let me give you short introductions about her. Sabina Mohyuddin is a Bangladeshi American Muslim born and raised in Nashville, Tennessee. She graduated from Vanderbilt University in 1993 with a degree in mechanical engineering. In 2010, Sabina helped launch the Sons and Daughter of Abraham Project, which brings Muslim, Christian, and Jewish youth across Middle Tennessee together through interfaith dialogue and outreach programs. She was an outspoken critic of the 2012 anti-Sharia bill in the Tennessee state legislatures, and she has published a number of articles about it in the newspapers. She is the executive director of the American Muslim Advisory Council, which empowers the Muslim community in Tennessee through civic engagement, community building, and improved media relations. She is the chair of AMEC's annual Empowering Women Conference. Additionally, Sabina also serves on the boards of the League of Women Voters in Nashville and the National Organization of Workforce Diversity. So Sister Sabina will talk about 30 minutes, and then we will do Q&A. Please put your question in the chat or raise your hand. Thank you. Please, Sister Sabina.
Alaikum. Thank you, Dr. Muwahida, for that introduction and for inviting me here today to speak at your convention and hearing more about your organization, Muhammadiyah. Wow, I think you have a great mission, and empowering women is so important. I'd love to learn more about it later. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And let's see. Okay, can everyone see it?
Yes.
Okay. So the roles and challenges for Muslim women in public spaces in the U.S. As the introduction said, my name is Sabina Mohyuddin. I'm the executive director of the American Muslim Advisory Council. And I want to kind of just start, let's see, with kind of a general overview of Muslim women across America, especially in in public spaces. There is an organization in the US called the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding. And they do surveys specific to the Muslim community. In 2016, they did a poll on Muslim women, and they found that 30% of Muslim women increased donations to faith organizations. So, 2016 was during the election, presidential election in which Trump was elected. But Muslim women got very active during that election season, and you see kind of this change where they are more engaged And so that's where you have 30% Muslim women increased donations to faith organizations, meaning mostly mosques, but 20% Muslim women joined, volunteered, or donated to a civic organization for the first time. And I think that says a lot about kind of our changing attitudes on how involved we are in the community, and realizing that Muslim women's voice is very important. You know, we're half our community. 3 in 4 Muslims support Black Lives Matter. So they're very interested in social justice movements. In that survey in 2016, Muslim women surpassed men in education. So in the US, 73% of Muslim women have a graduate degree or higher. So a postgraduate degree or higher, and compared to 57% of Muslim men. But Muslim women, you know, experience more discrimination, racism, hate crime, just because of, especially if you do wear a scarf, the visibility. But it's not that much difference whether or not a Muslim woman wears a scarf or not, a hijab or not. But anyway, if you see this this graph, 69% of Muslim women in 2016 had faced some kind of religious discrimination versus 26% of women in the general public in the US. And then racial discrimination, 75% of Muslim women faced some kind of racial discrimination versus 40% of the US, general US women in the general US population. And then gender discrimination, 51% versus 45%. And so you can see already just being a Muslim woman comes with its challenges, and especially when it comes to religious, racial, or gender discrimination. So, you know, when you think about challenges for Muslim women in public spaces, like in the general public space, you know, it's easy to become a target of discrimination or hate crimes. And of course, we know wearing a hijab makes you visibly a Muslim, but these challenges are faced by women who do not wear a hijab also. So, but women become an easy target. And one of the reasons is the stereotypes that are out there about Muslim women, that they are oppressed, they are uneducated, they need saving, and they become easy prey for discrimination because it just feels like people think they can get away with it. Also, one of the challenges is Muslim women are held to different standards. So it's like they can't escape those stereotypes, but then it's the irony is some of the stereotypes are how they are kind of weaponized against our community. So I'll talk about that in a second with some examples we have of elected officials. And holding on to faith in a man's world. So when you think about how do you, if you're in business or, you know, working for a company or in politics, how do you make those deals? In US society, a lot of time this is men getting together after work at a bar, things like that. And so those just become challenging for Muslim women, and surveys have shown that Muslim women are more likely to be observant Muslims. So, you know, those are challenges Muslim women have to navigate. There are challenges to public life and being in public space within the Muslim community. So there's expectations other Muslims have on Muslim women. And when I say other Muslims, it could be Muslim men, it could be other Muslim women, that Muslim women should remain in the private space and not necessarily in public spaces. And so, you know, and a lot of time that comes with back home ideas and cultural cultural ideas that people bring here, and then try to keep that kind of attitude up. One challenge that I've seen personally, and in this would go across the years, is limited roles for Muslim women in mosques. And because they're limited roles, you look at most mosque leadership, it's men, all men, and they don't acquire the skills or the mentorship or just the opportunities to be in leadership positions and be out there and be advocating. And so that hurts. And and when they do, when Muslim women do decide to take up roles in mosques, and there are mosques that are like, yes, we want women to serve, but they still face misogyny. And they're still having their ideas, put down, whether it's mansplaining, where, nothing a woman says is good enough, but if a man comes and says it, well, then it's a good idea. And so, and that will just kind of push women away from wanting to even join and be active in mosque. And then you have to understand the intersectionality, that Muslim women, they're women of color, and then even within that, Black Muslim women have extra challenges, and they face racism within the Muslim community and in the greater US population. And that comes to play, and you see in the next slide, just talking about some Muslim women in elected offices. This past election in 2020, I think their guesses, and I know it's not accurate, but from CARE and Jetpack and Empower Change, they put together a report of how many Muslims ran for elected office. And they said, I know, out of 110 people who ran, 57 people won. And I think there were 37 who were incumbents. And out of that 37 who were incumbents, 10 were women. And so of course, our two probably nationally most famous elected Muslim women are Ilhan Omar, who's the Minnesota congressman, and Rashida Tlaib, the Michigan congresswoman. And so, but they've been elected to state legislatures, I think in Delaware and Colorado, as mayor in Irvine, California. A Muslim woman was elected as mayor in Cambridge, Massachusetts. A Muslim woman was elected mayor. City councils across the country, county commissioners, school board members, and to judicial seats. So taking the example of Ilhan Omar. So she's a Somali refugee. She was born in Somalia. She came to Minnesota. So a couple of years ago, she made a comment. And since, they were both, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib were both elected in 2018. And so, but Ilhan Omar made a comment about, it's all about the Benjamins. And so she was referring to AIPAC, the lobby group for the Israeli lobby group, and talking about how their money influences votes in Congress. And so immediately that comment was seen as anti-Semitic. And she apologized. She said she didn't mean to be anti-Semitic. She was just talking about, how money influences policy. But immediately there were calls for her to resign. And, we know that there were congressmen that have said far worse things, racist things, things supporting Nazis, and they were never called to resign. But her being visibly Muslim woman, a Black Muslim woman, Somali Muslim woman, she is somehow expected to hold her tongue or be, walk on eggshells, be more careful in how she says and things and what she does, because she's being scrutinized day and night. And we know that with both of their elections, a lot of Islamophobes turned up saying, hey, they're going to bring Sharia, we can't let Muslims take over, but they, and so they face, and she's faced death threats. Both of them has faced death threats. And that's, because they're in that public space, they're held to different standards. If any mistake is made, the punishment has to be harsher. And so Rashida Tlaib, same thing with her. I think after she was elected, she was at a private event and she used a cuss word to talk about Trump. And the immediate backlash was her family should be ashamed of her. So kind of using that stereotype that a woman needs to be quiet, hold her tongue, stay at home, and that she cannot express her emotions. It wasn't a public event. It wasn't a public statement. Somebody just heard it and passed it on to the media. But again, she was scrutinized and just told she was unsuited to be a congresswoman. And so those are like extra challenges that Muslim women face. Okay.
You are muted, yeah.
Yeah. So Muslim women in leadership roles. So, and I'm sure you've heard of some of these women, especially Linda Sarsour. She's executive director of Empowered Change. And they really came out with the 2020 elections and doing phone banks, and Empowered Change had their My Muslim Vote campaign. And she's also one of the founders of the Women's March that began in 2017 after Trump was elected. Zahra Billoo, she's the CARE San Francisco Bay Area Executive Director. Hind Makki, she has this blog called Side Entrances, and she's part of the Islamic Society of North America's the Institute of Social Policy and Understanding report on reimagining Muslim spaces and having more inclusive spaces for Muslim women at mosques. Dalia Mogahed is the director of the research for Institute of Social Policy and Understanding. Farhana Kera is the executive director of Muslim Advocates. And then you have Ingrid Mattson, past president of the Islamic Society of North America. So, and these are some really very powerful Muslim women leading in the US today. So let's go into Muslim women in Tennessee and going back to the work of the American Muslim Advisory Council. We were founded in 2011 after an anti-Sharia bill was introduced in the Tennessee State Legislature. And so, so at that time, a group of Muslim leaders kind of got together and we strategized, okay, how do we defeat this piece of legislation? And I can tell you, within that core group of leaders, majority of them were women. We had Ramzia Sulaiman leading the way, Qasar Abdullah, myself, Zulfat Suera, and we basically, we mobilized the whole state. We actually had Muslims bussed in from across the state, and the state legislature meets in Nashville, Tennessee, but we had people from Knoxville and Memphis bussed in to hear this bill and advocate against it during the in front of their legislators. And so we realized that our state had a lot of different mosques that served a lot of different communities. We're diverse, say about 65,000 Muslims across Tennessee. In the Middle Tennessee area where Nashville is, say about 40,000. We have a large community of Kurds, about 20,000, and then we have Somalis, Arabs, South Asians. It's a very diverse community. But the mosque really kind of work for the spiritual well-being of their community members. And they were not prepared to fight Islamophobia. And so that's when we realized, wait, we need to start an organization dedicated to fighting Islamophobia. And so that's in 2012, we started AMEC, and our mission was to foster mutual trust and respect among people through civic engagement, community building, media relations, in order to protect all Tennesseans from prejudice and target violence. Sorry, I'm back to mute myself again. Okay, and our leadership has been women heavy. So our first chair of our board for AMEC, it was Zulfat Suera. So the picture on your left, and she was the chair for most of, except for say 2 years, she was the chair of AMEC, and she was just a known community leader across the state. I'm a founding board member for AMEC, and we've had a board that's been half women. And we're very intentional about our board makeup, and not just that we have women representation, but that ethnically, racially, we're diverse also. And I think it makes for better strategizing on issues to understand our communities, because we are a very diverse community. And also being intentional about our work reaching Muslim women across the state, because oftentimes they're kind of left out of the conversation. And in 2017, I stepped down from the board and started first as part-time, working for AMEC part-time. And then in 2019, I became the executive director for AMEC. And it's interesting because most of the work we do, a lot of the work we do is with mosque leaders, kind of organizing them so they can speak with a united voice. And so, me as a Muslim woman working with mosque leadership, which is almost exclusively men, it's an interesting dynamic, because I know if I step into a masjid, I'm looked at one way. But when I come in as executive director of AMEC, people show me a lot of respect. And what I really find from the Muslim community here is a respect for my role and for the work that AMEC does, because we're here just to empower the Muslim community. It's not about taking credit for ourselves and what we do, but really uplifting and giving a strong voice for our community. So like I mentioned before, serving Muslim women, empowering Muslim women is very important to me. It's an important mission of AMEC, because you can't empower our communities if you've left half of them out. And so that's why we are intentional about reaching Muslim women. So we have a yearly Empowering Women conference. This year, because of COVID, we didn't have it. I really missed it. But this conference is like a day and a half, but it's to give opportunity for Muslim women to learn about issues that are affecting them and be a part of the solution. So we invite other Muslim speakers, but we also invite non-Muslim speakers, because we think it's important that Muslim women hear about issues from whoever the experts are, whether they're Muslim experts or non-Muslim experts. So for example, we've talked about domestic violence. We brought in the local leaders from the YWCA who have a domestic violence shelter. But then we've also brought in Muslim scholars, women scholars, to talk about domestic violence. And so having these conversations in a safe space where it's all women and they feel free to speak is very important. Also, we want to increase civic engagement and community involvement of Muslim women. We're really missing out when we don't include Muslim women voices in our decision making. But women can be very powerful advocates for their children, advocates for the families, advocates in their community. But sometimes, talking to women, they don't know how to get started, where to get started, what can they do. They feel like they don't know how to navigate the spaces where they can get involved. And so for us to bring in people, we brought in people from the city government, we've to talk about opening businesses, or talk about some of the challenges in education, and then help the women kind of think, okay, this is what I can do. I can do A, B, C, and take action and make a difference in our community. And we're also very intentional of giving award and recognizing Muslim women who are involved in the community and who are making a difference. And so I think that this is one of my favorite programs with AMAC. So women in public office in Tennessee. So Tennessee, even I belong to several national Muslim organizations and leadership groups. And, a lot of the Muslim community, they live out in California or Chicago, Chicago or Detroit area or New York area, and when I say I'm from Tennessee, they're like, what? There are Muslims in Tennessee, this is kind of this surprise. And I like to tell them, hey, Muslims are doing a lot of great things in Tennessee. We have our challenges, Islamophobia is rampant, but we are continuously fighting against it. And I had to mention 3 women who served in public office in Tennessee. So the first one, Samar Ali. Samar Ali, she's now a professor a law professor at Vanderbilt University, but she's also the president of Millions of Conversation, who tackles Islamophobia through conversations. But she was appointed back, I believe it was 2012, by Governor Bill Haslam, and he was a Republican governor. She was appointed by Governor Haslam to the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development as the International Affairs Assistant. So, but when she was appointed, she faced a lot of backlash. The Islamophobes, locally and then across the U.S., hammered her and saying that she was going to bring Sharia law to Tennessee, and that Governor Haslam needs to, fire her from her position. And so it was a continuous campaign against her. But, to Governor Haslam's credit, he came out strongly defending her. But she was kind of the first person in that public role in Tennessee, and it was hard. It was very hard for her to face that kind of not just local backlash, but national backlash. And then we have Zulfat Suera. So again, she's one of our founding board members and longtime chair of AMAC. And in 2019, she was elected the Nashville Metro Council as a National Metro Council member at large. And what it means is, at large means for the whole city. So she had to have enough votes throughout the city to get elected. And so this was an amazing feat for, someone who is new to politics, but it really spoke to her character and expertise. She's a CPA, and she worked for a major for Meharry Medical College, and so she had the expertise, but her being able to pull in such a diverse group of voters to and alongside Muslim voters, it was a very exciting election for the Muslim community in Middle Tennessee, in the Nashville area, to have a candidate that they not just any Muslim candidate, but someone who had for years, I mean, since she moved to the Nashville area in the late 1990s, was a part of the community, from doing halakas, from doing the taxes for different masjids. So everyone knew her as a leadership, knew her in her role as chair of AMEC. To see her get elected was very exciting. But during the election, again, she faced backlash, and the Islamophobes, they were hammering her on social media. How can you get this Muslim, saying all those stereotypes about Muslims, Muslim women, and someone even published her home address, and so there was a lot of fear she had to get over, and it was hard, but she had a lot of friends across Nashville supporting her. So she's currently serving on the Metro Council. I guess she's up for re-election in 2021. And then we have Dr. Berthena Nabaa McKinney. She's a longtime educator. She was the principal of the National International Academy for several years, which is the Islamic school in Nashville. And in July 2020, she was appointed by the Metro Nashville City Council to the school board because a previous school board member had passed away, so there was a vacancy. And so she was appointed. She had to run to keep her seat in the 2020 November 3rd elections. She did not win, but we look forward to seeing her in that position. And so it's kind of overcoming, like sometimes people, first glance, they see a Muslim woman and they're like a bit doubtful, but it seems like once they know the expertise that they bring, and the character and the voice and the advocacy for marginalized community, then they get the support. So we really look forward to her running again and winning. Let's see.
You have 2 minutes more.
Okay, I'm almost. And so challenges Tennessee women face in public. Of course, visibility creates more backlash from Islamophobes, especially in Tennessee. If you're not in position of power, it's easier to kind of be visible. But when people think you have more power than they do, that's when really the Islamophobes kind of really come out of the woodworks and give you a lot of trouble. A lot of Muslim leaders here, especially the women, have faced death threats one time or another. And as a Muslim woman, you have to be more qualified than white men to lead. But that's a challenge Muslim men face also, or any person of color. Muslim women have to keep breaking stereotypes when they're in public spaces. And then we have to take extra precaution for our safety, just because of the higher rates of discrimination and hate crimes against Muslim women. I think it would be very helpful if Muslim women had more leadership development opportunities. And that's part of what we do with the Women's Conference. But, with mosque leadership being dominated by men, I think women kind of, they lose those opportunities for leadership development. So I think the mosque actually coming up and creating a favorable environment for women to take leadership roles and to excel in them. And so that's kind of some of my thoughts on that. and I'd love to hear other people's thoughts. So thank you. I'm looking forward to hearing questions.
Thank you so much, Sister Sabina, for your comprehensive explanations about Muslim woman situation in the US, their challenges. And it is very true, that Muslim woman is always be, even though people say that they are kept in the back, they are like in domestic, but then actually no, they have been like in the front. And in the Islamophobia, because of Islamophobia and everything, they have been in the front of advocacy. They have been in the front of being a victim too. Yeah, so I will read some of the questions here that we have in the chat. Yeah, there is like one from Jimmy Ardiansha. It said that in the earlier period of Islamic history, Muslim women enjoyed the freedom of movement and participated in many spheres of social life. They cooperated with men, both in military and civil life. Their freedom enabled women to develop their latent faculties. That is why our Muslim women excelled in the field of war, like many Indonesian women Muslim freedom fighters, in the colonial time. And there's like also Muslim women work in literature, oratory, public administration, theology, and etc. As earlier Muslim society gave women their fundamental right to education and self-development, what are the costs that our women lost those prerogative rights and have to work really hard to get them back? So why actually we kind of move backward in a way in modern time?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's interesting because I'm listening to a book called Destiny Disrupted by Tamim, and I forgot his last name, so I don't want to say it wrong, but it's called Destiny Disrupted, and just talking about Islamic history of the world through Islamic eyes, and how early in Islamic history women played more vital roles in community, and why did that our roles regress over time? And one of the explanation is in times of turmoil, people like to go back to what's familiar, what's easy, and looking at things in black and white. And this idea of a public and private space and putting women conveniently in this private space and seeing that as the answer to all our problems. If women just took care of the kids and the kids would grow up well, and prioritize that, and then, men would go to work, and having this kind of idealized vision for the community. Now, does that work? Is that good not just for women, for society, when you have half the women who have skills and abilities to advocate, to create a better community for our children, for our families. Wherever Muslims are, we should be the ones on the forefront of advocating for what's good. So especially living in a non-Muslim society, it's not good enough that we are in our own homes, or we go from our homes to our mosque and everything is okay. We really need to look around and see how our neighbors are doing, whether they're Muslims or non-Muslims. I mean, that's irrelevant. How our neighbors are doing, how the city is doing, what we can do to improve. We're a minority. There's like maybe some estimates of 3.5 million Muslims. That's from the Pew Center for Research, but a lot of Muslim organizations say, well, it's more like 6 to 7 million Muslims. However many, we're still a minority, and unless we really activate our entire community, we can't afford to lose half of our community. Unless we really activate our entire community, we're always going to be behind. But as long as we have, we're going to always have immigration. We're going to always have Muslim immigrants coming from societies where patriarchy exists, and that's the way it is. And they're going to come in, they're going to say, no, we shouldn't be doing this way. We need to go back to what is familiar. And again, seeing things in black and white, women in private spaces, men in public spaces, and it becomes very hard for them to see especially like the mixing of genders, because you can't do this work unless you're talking with men and meeting with men. But Islam provides a proper way of doing that, and it doesn't violate Islam. But people are so strict, and it's interesting, those ideas of porta and those strict separation of genders came from the Byzantine empire. It came from the Persian Empire. It wasn't from the early Islamic communities during the time and after the time of the Prophet Muhammad. So we're going to keep challenging that, but no matter what, our children growing up here are not going to subscribe to the back home ways of doing things, because as a human being, you want to do something good in your community, and that means getting out and being in the community and advocating.
Sister Sabina, the next question is actually from me, and I want you to kind of like talking from your experience to what can people do, Muslim women and Muslim men do to be better allies for Muslim women like you and other Muslim women that you mentioned in the presentations. They have been so brave to put themselves out there, and actually becoming like subject of like very hyper scrutiny. And sometimes like they get award and recognitions, but like their work is not only during the award night, their work is every day. So what do you wish, or maybe from experience, this is a good ally, and this is what we need more from Muslim men and Muslim women that maybe not necessarily be in public themselves. Thank you.
Right. I think, and it's interesting with Ilhan Omar. So I've heard from Muslim men who've told me, wow, she's saying too much. She's being outspoken. Somebody needs to control her. And so that was, to me, is very troubling kind of talk. And so again, they're bringing in kind of their ideas of women need to be kind of soft-spoken, and but if a man did it, it would be, they would get the free pass. And so I think you have, and I've talked with Masjid leadership. People individually, they're great people, but they don't recognize when misogyny happens. They don't recognize when they're speaking over a woman. You ask women and they will tell you, yes, this happened to me. I was on this board. I tried to say something. Nobody listened. Literally, recently I was speaking at a meeting at a masjid, and I had an idea. And I brought that idea up weeks before, and not until a man mentioned that idea, then suddenly everyone was like, yeah, this could work. And I was, and so I think, we all have to step back and see, if you really, want to support each other, if you really want allies between Muslim men and women, that you've got to evaluate your ideas of women and ideas of Muslim women, because a lot of Muslim men will accept American Muslim women, American women, non-Muslim women in the roles that they see them in at work, but then they come within the community, in Muslim communities, then they feel threatened by it. And so this is, to me, this is like kind of long-term work that we have to do, to respect that women we're not, I guess we're not, you can't paint us with a single brush. We're diverse in who we are and how we react, how we talk, and accepting that. So I think we this is work we have to do, but I think it takes a bit of stepping back and redefining or analyzing how you think of women, and why you think of women in the U.S. society one way and Muslim women in another way.
Thank you. Is there like other questions? And if you can raise your hand, I can also unmute you and also give you questions, let you say your questions directly. But you're so right about the training to listen to women. I think it's very important because and maybe rather than saying the idea or like copying the idea, maybe it's also sometimes I say that, can you introduce me, and can you say that I'm gonna have like some important idea, and I ask men to open it, but then give the spotlight to women.
Mm-hmm.
But even that, we cannot always do that, right? I mean, it's still like the double burden, because first, like, we have to like look for allies ourselves, and then we have to think about the social justice issue ourselves. And sometimes, yeah, I mean, I hope like the burden of like mobilizing and also make people listen is not only like Muslim woman burden only.
Right. I mean, just creating better listeners, right?
Yeah.
And that's something men and women can go through training together. But I've seen some Muslim masjid boards. They're like, we want women on our board. We want women on our board. And I said, you've had women and they've left. So my question to you is, have you changed the culture of your board to allow women on your board? And I had one friend who belonged to another masjid, and she was asked to serve on the board. And her question was, if I serve on the board, could I eventually one day be president of the board? Mm-hmm. Because women have to see that, they're not tokenized either. And I think that's also an issue in public spaces. As a Muslim woman, sometimes we're tokenized. So you bring that one Muslim woman on a board, or even, in a city board or a committee or another nonprofit organization. They're like, we want to diversify. And, sometimes a Muslim woman, especially when you're wearing a hijab, it's like, oh, everyone can see we're diverse, but they're just being tokenized, and nobody really wants to hear what you have to say. And that's when you have to work harder than everyone else to prove that you are an expert in your field and you should be listened to.
You're muted, Sarah.
Nana Firman, do you want to ask questions? And then Imam Samsi Ali? Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Sister Sabina. So my question is, I typed it. Do you think that maybe it's not the lack of women scholars in Islam, but maybe the limited, compared to male scholars, is that's like part of the problem also? Because then, because they could be like our voice also when, explaining all, the based on the fiqh, or the from the religious perspective.
Yeah, I definitely think we need more women scholars, and the ones that are out there, usually women gravitate to it, and we really need to see men and women gravitate to diversity of scholars, to women scholars, so that they hear these issues of fiqh or any kind of religious issues from a different perspective, and get used to that. I mean, women, scholars were, we know that Aisha radiallahu anha, she was a scholar. People listened to her, men and women. So that's what, we don't just need the women scholar, we need men and women listening to and hearing those scholars, so that it becomes not something out of the ordinary, but it's something every day that they do.
Imam Shamsi, do you want to ask questions?
No, I just reminded you about that. You are muted, but thank you, Sister Sabina. Such wonderful presentation. As other people used to say, that behind every great man, there is a woman. In Islam, we say beside of every great man, there must be a great woman. Because if you study carefully about Islam, from the very beginning, theologically speaking, you know, the ayat of the Quran, even sometimes as a man, I feel that there's even more, you know, preference to the woman than the man. To be honest, you know, for example, when Allah talk about nafs, desire, looks like men's the people, only the people who have desire, men are protected in this regard. So there's a privilege here and here. But I just wanted to say the problem is, and it's not only about gender issue in Islam, it's about almost in every issue, is cultural view of the religion. You know, I am leading Jamaica Muslim Service. I don't know, Sister Sabina, where you're from originally, but mostly Bengali backgrounds. And when I was invited for the first time to lead Jamaica Muslim Center, simply because I don't have that long beard, people are questioning, really, are you really an imam? You know, and so when I began my activities, I didn't see any woman at all in the masjid, not in the Jamaat, even in congregational prayer. So I said, "What the woman?" He said, "There's a Maulana said to me, the women are supposed to stay in the masjid at home because they are fitna. They can be fitna." So I asked this Maulana, "Do we allow your wives to go to the market, to the bazaar?" And he said, "Of course, yes." So bazaar is an evil place. Masjid is an angel place. Why you don't allow your women to come to the masjid? So finally, we have our own women gatherings, and believe me, alhamdulillah, we have a lot of women in our masjid now. So I think the problem is how to face this cultural view of the religion. That Islam is about Quran and Sunnah, how the Prophet Muhammad Sallam, as Brother Jimmy mentioned earlier, that, you know, in the earlier of Islam, women were even in Fajr, Salatul Fajr, were in the masjid. You know, a woman protested Umar. Umar was so tough. And when Umar wanted to just reduce the mahar, a woman stood up. You can imagine that in the middle of the man, you know. So look at the bravery, the courage of the man. And also, I think it is the interpretation of religious texts now is mostly dominated by male. And that's why it is very relevant to that question Nana asked, that we need more our sisters to learn Islam. Of course, alhamdulillah, we have our sisters Ilhan and Rashida Talib and others who are successfully involved in politics and public life, but also in religious life, in terms of scholarship, we need more women. So they're not only protesting, not only protesting, but they have an alternative interpretation into religious texts. And Aisha, historically, Aisha is the third narrators of hadith among the Sahaba of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. She was a professor to many Sahaba at the time. So for me, lastly, empowering the woman is not only about religious issues, not only about Muslim community issue, it's a da'wah issue. Because one of the criticism to the Muslim community is about gender issue, and I think we need to answer that by our action. Thank you so much, Sister Sabine.
Yeah, thank you, Imam Samshi, and thank you for being the allies. I have two other questions here, and I hope that everybody also can, do what Imam Samshi Ali do and give space for the woman in the masjid, because like Sister Sabina said, that if the masjid also still discouraging for women to even expanding their presence, how can Muslim women to be more comfortable even in more hostile environment outside their community? So there are the other two questions, and I will just read these two to you. First is, do you think the increasing number of Muslim women in politics is actually a step towards complementary or equality? Because you talk about tokenism, do you think it's significantly gonna step toward that? Or maybe if it's not, what can we do to push it, right? And the second question is, one of the unfortunate popular opinion or stereotype in the society is a woman cannot become a leader because they're not capable of thinking fully. How we handle that? And it's kind of funny because I think in the presentation that you say, there is a slide that Muslim women actually more educated than Muslim men. And I think in many statistics in higher education now, women is actually, there is more number of women in higher education rather than men, even outside Muslim society. So, but I would like to know what you think. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And thank you, Imam Shamsi, for your insights. My parents are from Bangladesh. Mm-hmm. But going on to the question, I think more women in these leadership roles, whether it's public or just out there, will make men, especially those with those very cultural understanding of of Islam rethink. But I also think when their children grow up here, and it's always the case that somebody who is very cultural and they raise daughters, and then they realize, wait, they want their daughter to be as successful as other women, then their ideas start to change. But that I just, I still find it a bit ironic that when I'm working with these masjid leaders, community leaders, there's a lot of respect. But again, you go in the masjid and in the leadership there, it's like they've separated, okay, these women are out there, they're working, and then these women, our rest of our women are supposed to be kind of secluded in a particular space, that those leadership roles are for particular women, and not always imagining it for all women. And so, but I think those barriers will, those ideas will be chipped away slowly. It's interesting, when we started AMAC in 2012, a group of AMAC board members met with a really well-known Islamic scholar, and to tell, this is what we're trying to do in Tennessee. We want to fight Islamophobia. And I told you, our chair was a Muslim woman, half our board were women. And that scholar looked and said, I would never let my wife do the work you're doing. And so again, it's that, okay, you guys, I know we need you. You need to do your work. You did great work in defeating the anti-Sharia bill, but I wouldn't let my wife do it. And so again, that kind of, that's got to change in terms of thinking it's okay for one group of women, as if you've already sold your soul, so you might as well just keep doing it. But I have to protect, my women from that kind of thing. And then the idea that women cannot be leaders, I don't encounter that, but that goes back to why, as a Muslim woman, you have to work twice as hard. So if, a Muslim man being in my position gets a free pass, automatically seen as an expert. As a woman, you've got to prove your expertise, and you have to work harder. You have to do things, you have to be a perfectionist. Like, you can't mess up, because when you mess up, you'll face more backlash. And so, I think men are, going away from that kind of thinking that somehow women are not capable, because I think women in America, Muslim women in America and across the world, are really showing otherwise in all fields.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. So we are already 4:34. And thank you so much for your answer. And I think, even though we're smiling, we actually give you, everybody here, a big task. Please listen to us. Please engage with us, not only asking for our engagement, and also please be our allies, and start it with the woman in your family too. You cannot say that, let them out, but no, I will keep my wife or my daughter here, because I think that it's also connected to what Ustaz Awad and everybody say, there's double standard, there's hypocrisy. What kind of ideal? And we have to start it from ourselves. And Sister Sabina, thank you so much for your sharing and your explanations about all the challenge and the strategy that you have been implemented, for you and your advocacy. And I hope, and I think and thank you so much. And we hope that this is not, our end of the collaborations, and we hope that Muhammadiyah and Muhammadiyah Women Organization can also involve in empowering Muslim women here, not only Indonesian Muslim women in diaspora, but other Muslim women in the world and in the US. Thank you so much. So the next sections is a little break. We will have quiz, and I will I will introduce a little bit. I will switch to Bahasa Indonesia now.
Thank you, Sister Sabina.
Oh yeah, please say goodbye and thank you for Sister Sabina. Can we do clapping a little bit.
Thank you so much, Sister Sabina Mahidin. It's been wonderful and engaging. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Yes.
And we can hear you loud and clear, Mbak Sarah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so the next sessions will be, in Bahasa Indonesia. I have to switch. Jadi sesi selanjutnya akan dipandu oleh Bang Ikhwan Musafir, atau lebih sering dikenal dengan Bang Imus. Beliau adalah Direktur Radio IMSA yang mempunyai background computer science yang saat ini berdomisili di Dublin, Ohio, dan aktif di kegiatan dakwah komunitas Muslim Indonesia di Amerika. Saya persilahkan Bang Imus untuk memandu acara kuis. Dan
Bentar Bang Mas, saya kasih co-host dulu ya. Namanya mana ini? Oh,
Dan
Bang Imus. Oke. Ganti nama.
Dan acara ada hadiahnya. Jadi silahkan pada mengambil handphone untuk mengikuti kuis berhadiah ini. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Makasih Sister Sarah Muwahidah ya.